Hello and welcome to Unleashed. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex. You can find us at umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm excited to be here today with Jessica Magoch, who is a jazz musician and an expert on sales and has put those two together. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Will. Appreciate it.
So, talk to me about music and sales and what do they have to do with one another?
Absolutely. I'll start out with a little bit of my story. I'm primarily a musician. I went to school for musical theater, much to my parents' chagrin. But my father was a sales trainer, national sales manager for his career, and he always wanted to get us into sales. So when I started auditioning out of college, um, the best job to do, with flexibility and whatnot was sales. So I started getting into sales as well, and learned the basics, and then like quickly excelled. And then that company that I worked for had they exited. We built it from 0 to 100 million in revenue. And so I kind of like learned all the nuts and bolts of running a sales organization there, and didn't ever intend to do sales after that. But then there was an opportunity to invest in some women-led social enterprises. And it was there that I learned the value of what learning how to sell could bring them. So that's how I started my consulting and coaching business. And then as I started that, there was always this question kind of posed to me: Jessica, you can teach people how to sell, but that thing that makes someone like extraordinary, that makes like three times the person who does a 3 times quota consistently, like that thing, you can't teach it. You just either you have it or you don't. And anytime I hear that, my ears kind of go up like, is it true? Is it really? And so, I was one of those anomalies. And so I said, well, if I can examine why I was different and the people that I trained were different, and maybe we can dissect this and find out, well, what is the thing? If you give all people the same training, same information, but then some people take it and fly, and others struggle, like then there's something big missing. So um, part of my success building a sales team was that I hired a lot of actors and artists, probably because I connected with them and they were in my circle, but they were very easy to train and had that, that thing, that inexplicable thing. And so as I learned more, uncovering the hood of like what goes on behind the scenes in the sales conversation, this concept of people make decisions first emotionally and back them up with logic. You've probably heard that before, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And and so it's been more and more well adopted. But how, like, what does that mean actually in a sales conversation? How do you actually bring that to a sales conversation to help make a difference? Um, and being a musician, I I always knew that music really is the fastest way to affect someone's emotions. So I'm going to take a half a step back and kind of explain that concept for people who may not have heard it before. Um, so the idea of people make decisions first emotionally and back them up with logic is from the study of emotional intelligence. So actually did some studies and looked at the brain and dissected like where and how information travels through the brain, and saw that it goes through the amygdala first before it hits the frontal cortex. And the amygdala is like the middle of your brain where emotions happen, like passion and excitement and sad and all that. And it's also where you could kind of say like your gut reaction is. It's in that amygdala. And then it travels to the frontal cortex or prefrontal cortex. I forget which one it is, but this is the area where you kind of start to dissect information and you start backing up that emotional path, that emotional decision you made with logic. And this happens subconsciously. People don't know it, but what it looks like is, someone presents you something, you have a feeling about it either way, and then you kind of sort through information. Maybe you make a spreadsheet or pros and cons or whatever your logical method of making a decision, but all of that is actually influenced by that decision you already made in your amygdala by your emotional response. And then you would think, people say, well, we wouldn't want to make these decisions emotionally, right? We would want to avoid that. Certainly, like powerful, like business executives, they're not going to be making emotional decisions. They're going to try to put that aside as much as possible and make logical decisions when they're actually aware of it. But then I found this other study that was so interesting, and it said that the information we're able to process in the logical part of our brain is very limited. And that's where that idea of like, you can only make a decision from 3 or 4 options at a time. Like we can't actually process more than 4 pieces of information simultaneously. So that's why if you're offering packages and your sales offerings, you want to limit it to a maximum of like 4 different choices. But in the amygdala, we're actually able to process many, many hundreds of times more information immediately. So it actually is that our amygdala is actually better at processing a lot of information than our frontal cortex. So we are actually it would be actually beneficial that we do pay more attention to that initial gut reaction, though we might not be able to verbalize the reasons why you feel something. What's happening, behind the scenes is more powerful than we're able to articulate. So this idea of like, okay, emotions, how do they work? And I think like hiring actors and artists and my background learning about emotions for, all of my acting training really helped coming to the table, talking to people, and understanding what was going on their side emotionally. People need to have an emotional response in order to take action.
Okay. So how do you incorporate those insights from music into sales? I think you call it like the musicology of sales.
Yeah, sales musicology. So first of all, before any of that, you got to start with your scales, right? Any artist, any great artist, before you're able to be super creative and kind of go from ordinary to extraordinary, you got to get to ignore ordinary first. So it always starts with like, here's your basics, here's your scales. Once you get your scales, which is like your sales frameworks, your sales, your basic sales techniques, your processes. Once you get that, then the next layer on top of that is to bring artistry to it. And that's why I say what selling is, the art of selling, all those books, that this is what this is referring to. So what can we learn about music, which is able to transform people on such a subconscious level so quickly and apply it to sales? So one thing is the dynamics of music. If you look at music, like it generally follows a kind of like a storyline where you start out low and then you build and you crescendo and you hit a big peak, and then you slowly denouement and the song plays out. So when we look at sales conversations, I actually did some studies and I was curious, like, do generally songs that appeal to us most in general as a public have a lot of dynamics in them? So is that true for sales conversations? And so I was working with a group and I asked if they would be my guinea pigs. Could I pull your sales can I pull the audio of your sales conversations and throw it into one of my music tools to measure the dynamics and see visually if dynamics in the conversation had anything to do with or any correlation with the close rate. And it turns out that absolutely it did. The conversations that were more dynamic, where you saw lots of like ups and downs and peaks and valleys, which could represent emotion, right? Or represent quiet listening, and the back and forth and conversation, were more likely to lead to closed won opportunities versus conversations that were more static. So I thought that was really interesting, and certainly have to do like a lot more, scientific work around that. But at this point, I could just say it's a correlation. And so thinking about how do you bring musicality into your sales process, right? Something simple as that, to make your conversations more interesting. Are you bringing emotion to the table? What are we bringing on the salesperson's side? Because this isn't about manipulating the customer. It's about who do I have to be in order to help a person take action when we know that it's in their best interest, but their natural human tendency is they're not going to want to take action. We're always going to, default to what we know and the safe route. So a salesperson's main role is to help them take that action. And then when you think about music and artistry, it's that creativity that we bring to sales. How do you teach creativity? So I do a lot of exercises with my sales teams where we try to unlock that creativity in non-sales situations. And why is creativity important? Because we need to be able to, in the moment, find creative solutions to wherever the customers, whether it's an objection or a challenge problem that they have. That's one of the keys to a successful salesperson, is to be creative. So we'll do exercises that actually unlock creativity. Because I think in many ways, like most traditional schooling doesn't necessarily promote creativity. And so, it can get lost in our childhood. So we'll do that.
Exercises. So share some of those exercises. What are some of those exercises you do to unlock creativity?
So what I like to do a lot of improvisational exercises to help people think on the spot, because creativity is like really connecting with a part of yourself that maybe a voice you kind of used to turning off, like your instincts, your unique self. So improvisational exercises, like I have this game I play where I have slides. I give them 5 slides, and the slide just has a picture on it, and it's maybe like a raccoon on one, and maybe like a water droplet on another. So like very vague. And they are given in the beginning, they're given what they're selling and who they're selling it to. And they have to give a presentation with the slides without ever having seen the slides. So it forces them to think to be 100% in the moment, because you can't think ahead and think about what am I going to say next, because you don't know what's on the slide. And the slide has to be relevant to what you're saying. So if a water droplet comes up, you got to figure out how that water droplet's going to influence what you're going to say and how you're going to sell it. So it's really helpful, and it's really fun to see like people that are, particularly people who are like very intellectual in their head a lot, to start getting out of their head and into their body and start responding more to their instincts.
Okay, so what would be an example of the, like, what you're selling and who you're selling to? Like, just set that up for me.
Okay, so let's say, and I like to think of it's like your Shark Tank, like you're selling to the sharks. you might be selling a handbag that you can use underwater.
Okay.
Right?
So and you're selling it to the Shark Tank people?
Yeah, sometimes we'll do like, okay, we're the sharks. The people of the sharks are the room, or you could pick, another group of people.
Okay, and then
you're selling it to a school of fish or something. So
and then
you just
you
have fun with it.
and then you're going to show 5 slides. The person doesn't know what they are in advance, and you'd show like, a raccoon, and you're like, a raccoon walks around the forest, and they probably can't carry their food with them, right? But wouldn't they love to have a bag to carry the little bits and morsels that they find along the way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
yes,
they have to just totally improvise based on.
They totally have to improvise.
Okay.
Now, it also shows them the importance of having a framework to rely on so that you can be creative in the moment.
Yeah.
So like we start out with, okay, here's the framework. You need to start with the problem. Well, first you introduce yourself, but you need to start your sales presentation with the problem, because people aren't going to understand the solution unless they see like how it's going to solve a problem they have right now. So a tendency for a lot of salespeople is to go right to like, I have the best handbag for underwater, and you kind of, when you see the difference of someone coming like, yeah, have you ever felt like a raccoon kind of scurrying through the night trying to figure out where your lip gloss is, So we're starting out with a problem, painting the picture. And then in the next, and the goal there is to connect emotionally with the problem. So isn't it and using emotional words, isn't it frustrating? Isn't it a headache? Or, don't you get so depressed when? And then the next, and of course we're having fun with it, right? So then the next slide is intentionally something that is like a graph or a chart. And that slide is because we'll start with emotion and then we support it with logic, because that's kind of the path that the human brain's following, right? So the next slide is going to be something logical, where there may be a chart and you say like 47% of all underwater inhabitants say that they don't have a way to keep their lipsticks in order when they go out at night. I don't know. And then the next slide is then should be about the solution. So they have this framework of like problem, supporting fact, solution, and then the close or the ask at the end. And so they've kind of got that, and that then becomes really helpful to couple that with the picture, but then everything else is completely made up and on the spot. And it's really fun to play, but it helps people get in a space of creativity. And then if you go into a sales call right after that, you'll be in a different state than you would if you were just like worrying about what might they say, what am I going to say after that. So that's a fun one.
Okay, I love that exercise. What's another exercise you do?
Let's see. Well, I have one that's not so much. I play objection, hot potato. So also about being creative in the moment and following your instincts and your gut. So we take like a ball, or because I never have a potato, but we usually use a ball. And one person has to throw a ball to another person in the room and throw out an objection that a prospect might get. And then the person has to answer it. They have the ball now. It's a hot potato. They have to answer it quickly and throw an objection back to the next person. So again, it's like it kind of takes away that opportunity to overthink things, and because what they say is like, hey, actually my gut is pretty good at knowing the answer to these things. I don't have to, worry so much. But if I'm connected to my inner, creativity, and I'm also connected to my prospect, then I know the answers. I just have to trust that they're there.
What are some of the best ways to handle objections? Is there kind of a set of categories like, hey, if you get an objection, there's 4 ways you can handle it. One way would be to
Yeah.
ask a question in advance, like, why is that important to you? Or, what would happen if, what would happen if, that were true? Or what would happen if, what was the worst
Yeah.
that would happen? I mean, is there a question
Oh
kind
my
of
gosh, there's so
response?
many.
So what are some of the classic approaches to teaching objection handling?
Yeah. So objections are the thing that kind of, that kind of defines, are you going to get the sale or not, right? So it's really critical that we think about how we're going to approach them. I think if you're thinking about this, but what are objections? We got to start with that, so that way, whatever we use to overcome them. And so if we're looking at this emotional journey that a prospect takes, they're like, have a problem, but they're afraid to take action. And then Mr. and Mrs. Salesperson shows up, shows them the solution, and then kind of encourages them to, take that leap. Because ultimately people are afraid to make a mistake, right? Afraid to make a mistake. You might have your job at risk. You might look like an idiot, definitely money at stake. So any true objection, I've distinguished just a question from an objection. Objection's a reason why they're not going to buy. Is it depends where they are in the sales process, but if you've already qualified them, they're a good fit, it's the right time, and you're speaking to the right people, and they have the money, but they still have an objection of why they're not going to move forward. Then it all ultimately comes back to fear of making a decision. And that's why most sales end up in no decision. They don't go with your competitor. They just don't do anything. They kind of get, they just decide it's not enough of a priority to take the risk, to take action. So when you think about that, the emotions that are involved in objections, the first thing you have to do before you address an objection is eliminate the emotion from it. And the way you do that is very simple. It's by agreeing with them and acknowledging their objection, empathizing with it. So absolutely, totally hear you on that. Validating them. You're not the only one. I hear that a lot. People are having really, the market's going crazy right now. Everyone's in kind of a holding pattern, right? So I'm kind of, instead of coming at them like argumentatively to show them like, no, you're wrong, here's the right answer, no, you're right, and then I'll offer whatever my response would be, and then ask them again, ask them if I've satisfied that question for them. So empathize, offer, and then ask a follow-up question is the simple framework behind that. But the empathize part is the part that, like, in the moment, salespeople are quick to forget because they jump right to like, I have a great answer for that. I practiced that, and jumping right to the solution. But there are great other techniques too, like what you were describing, which is called like a negative reversal, or isolating the objection, which is like, okay, so let's say that wasn't a problem. Would you be moving forward, right? So determining first, like, is that really the only objection before I address that? Because often the real objection is not the objection that they state to you. So part of the, the challenge there is to dig and say like, okay, if the price was, lower, would you be moving forward with it? If I can get, you 10% off on this, would you be able to sign by Friday? And then we uncover like, oh, well, actually we have to do, okay, so price isn't really the real objection. What's under that you're not seeing, the value that's attached to it. Let's address that thing. Maybe it's like, didn't have the right people in the room, didn't have the right present the solution accurately, etc. So that's how I address objections, and look at them as opportunities, rather than a loss, a potential loss, and objections an opportunity to then show them something that they didn't see before.
So we were talking about, we kind of went down this rabbit hole of the creativity exercises. Um,
Yeah.
let's bring it back to this idea of musicology, sales musicology.
Uh-huh.
And are there other ways that you kind of extend and use that metaphor, kind of like melody or harmony or rhythm? We talked about sort of the dynamics of the whether we're piano or forte on it, but are there kind of other aspects that you find that the metaphor is helpful?
Yeah, I think, well, we talked about like creativity, like creating music, what it takes to be a creator of music, and then the performance aspect of it. Um, Sales and selling is a performance, and sometimes you have to, especially if you're feeling insecure about a meeting, or maybe it's a big meeting, or CEO of the world, you're meeting with the CEO of the world, and you just feel like, how can I bring this person any value? It's a great opportunity to remember you're in a performance, and life is about, it's not, it's about being the character you need to be in the moment, right? So, and that doesn't mean you're lying or you're not being yourself. It just means you're accessing the parts of yourself that you need in that moment. So if I'm going on stage as a musician, I have an alter ego. And if there's a great book, The Alter Ego Effect, highly recommend it. But it talks about how like great artists like Beyonce, they have an alter ego that they call upon in times when they need to, like when she needs to go on stage and be this fierce, I think Sasha was the name of her character, fierce character, to do that job. And Sasha is a part of her, but it's not the same person that goes to church on Sunday. It's not the same personality that she brought to the gospel choir. So when we think about selling, like who are we gonna bring? Like what character are we gonna bring to that moment? And that could be really helpful, with bringing confidence. I do that a lot with like, especially entry level salespeople, because here they are coming in and maybe they're trying to, connect with a CEO who's been doing the job for 30 years. And of course they're thinking like, what value do I have to bring? I just graduated college. And so we can bring in our alter egos to become a character, to perform in that moment and pull out that piece of confidence. And so I have them develop their alter egos and choose their alter egos. What's their name? What are their characteristics? How are you going to remind yourself? I have a action figure of Wonder Woman on my desk because she's my alter ego. And so I'll glance at her if I ever need a boost. Like that's my alter ego and who I need to be when I need that extra confidence going into an important meeting or something. So people find that really helpful. It might be like one of my salespeople, like she wore this specific pair of yellow high heels. Even if she was like on a Zoom meeting at home, when she put out those yellow high heels, she just felt more powerful. So everyone has their own different thing, but I encourage people to find that thing that you could connect with physically that helps you be the character you need to be in that moment.
Talk to me about cold calling.
Cold calling is the thing we love to hate, but we know that but the numbers just keep coming back that it's so effective. And it's actually 2023, they say it's going to be even more imperative that your outbound strategy involve phone calls. So cold calling, look, nobody likes a cold call. I don't like it. I don't know if you like it, Will. I try to be nice to cold callers because karma, is a thing. So if you're not nice to cold callers, you're gonna have to burn off some of that karma when you first start cold calling.
What do you say to cold callers? What do you say?
Well, I mostly examine because I listen to like anything I could steal to bring back to my teams at my work, right? But I mostly examine, and what you hear mostly is people getting on a phone, trying to control a conversation so that the person on the other side doesn't have an opportunity to talk until they hear the whole pitch. And sometimes that could be, if you let someone keep talking, that could be like 5 or 7 minutes, and you still haven't said anything, because they don't want you to say, I can't talk right now. This isn't a good time. Like, why are you calling me? Where'd you get my number? So nobody likes a cold call because we all feel like we're just a target on a list. Most of the time they're calling with something that is totally irrelevant to what you would need or do, because they haven't actually done any, research, most of the time. So the key to any cold call is to make it warm. And no matter what, like, framework you use or strategy or technique, like, the one thing you can do to immediately differentiate, get someone's attention, disarm them, is to show them that you know them. And do 15 seconds of research before you make that call. And it makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
So when you receive an inbound, cold call to you, and you say you're kind, like, do you just say, hey, thanks, sorry, I'm not interested, please take me off your list? Or do you actually like give them feedback? Hey, guess what? I'm actually a sales trainer, and can I give you some feedback on your opening there? You were like a little bit, I mean, how long do you listen, and what do you say actually?
Well, the thing is like, they know I'm a sales trainer. They know I'm a sales enablement specialist. They're usually calling about like a software tool. So I don't offer advice unless I'm asked. But I do get some really good calls. I do get some things that I'm really like blown away with, and internally our teams will, as we're developing strategies, just pass things around, like, look at this one I got. This one's really good. And yeah, some of them are super creative, but the thing that they all have in common is that they were personal. Some are to the extreme of like sending a video with my name on it, or sending a video and actually using my name in the video, so I know it wasn't sent to 100 other people, although there are a lot of Jessicas in the world. But anyway, that's besides the point. But giving that personal touch, I mean, to me, that's why you hire a human to do this job and not a computer. Email systems are great, but they serve a certain purpose. And if you hire a person, then they can make that email personalized. That's the first thing you need to do, is get their attention. And the best way to get someone's attention is by talking about them, not you.
So what are some of your tips if you're training some people to do outbound calls, cold calls?
Yeah. So most of, like, when I talk about like the scales, right? We have to have the framework first, and the main thing is to always to ask permission before everything you do. So, hey, I know I probably caught you off guard. You weren't expecting my call, but if you give me 30 seconds, I could let you know I called, and you could let me know if you want to continue chatting or just hang up on me. Does that sound good? And usually that elicits a little chuckle or a laugh, because that's what they were going to do, is hang up on you. And now by offering them that, you've actually eliminated the possibility that they will hang up on you. It's a little reverse psychology there. And then they usually say yes, or okay, fine, go 30 seconds. What do you got? And then what comes next is that personalization, opening up with like, hey, before I jump into that, I just saw you go to this school. My, cousin went there. How'd the team do this year, etc. Um, and then, okay. So anyway, the reason why I was calling is, and then rather than ask them open-ended questions like you would in a sales conversation when they're further down the pipeline, we want to make it really easy for them to answer. We don't want them to have to think too much, at least early in the conversation. So, I've been talking to a lot of other business owners in your industry, be very specific there. And, they've been saying they've been having they're complaining about one of either three of these problems. And then you list the problems. And then I'm not sure if any of those are a problem for you. We're not sure if any of those are priority for you to solve this year. And then if those three problems are those are the three that you'll really want to make sure you get right, and by knowing your customers. And then one of those three should resonate with them, and it's easier for them rather than saying what problems are you having now? It's too open-ended, especially they don't know what you're selling. People have a lot of problems. So getting very specific, and it also helps them understand what you do without actually saying what you do. And so, then get them talking about their problem before offering them the meeting, like a next step, which would be like a discovery call, or, depending on your sales process, a demo from there. So, so that's kind of the process. Always ask permission each step as you're going through your sales process. And then the musicology, bringing that to it. I could tell you the words to say all day long, but if you're saying it like this, and everyone's going to know that that you've got to get yourself in a mental state. Things like standing up, doing jumping jacks, things you would do before you got on stage or before you went into a game. This is your game. This is your show. This is your performance. You want to be 100% at your best coming into a cold calling block. Cause you're going to get no's, you're going to get rejected, but you got to keep going. And the emotion that you bring is contagious. The person on the other side is going to feel that. And you probably get a lot of cold calls, Will. I get a lot. That's a very fast way to differentiate yourself, is by the energy that you bring to the call.
Beyond kind of standing up or doing jumping jacks, do you have some other tips on how to make your voice more dynamic, how to make your voice, how to put more energy into your voice?
Beyond standing up, and that usually helps. Standing up usually is a thing. People will be naturally dynamic when they're connected to the words, to what they're saying. So if someone starts to sound monotone, I ask them to really think about what they're saying. If you're describing a problem, think about the feeling in that problem evokes, and then your voice will naturally follow. It doesn't, you don't have to manipulate your voice or think about it too much. It's more what's happening mentally will be reflected in your voice. If you hate cold calling, that's going to come across in your cold calling, in your conversations. So think about what the end game is. Why are you doing it? Who are you helping? How does this fit into the big picture? It's not forever. It's just for the next 2 hours. Things like that. So that'll all affect the dynamics of your voice, bringing that in. And then another thing is that alter ego part of it. Sometimes people think if I'm talking to a CEO, I have to be very professional. And what that idea of professional might mean, what does that mean to different people? Mostly, they're kind of stripping away their personality, their sense of humor, their dynamics. So they become more robotic, because they think that perception of this is what professional is. And if I'm not professional, I won't be respected. But, professional is helping people and being knowledgeable, and being friendly and developing relationships. So it's a little bit about like changing like who that character is that you're bringing to the call.
Tell us a bit about your sales training practice. What do you do for clients?
Yeah. So so as a sales coach, I do anything from helping develop sales strategies and playbooks, to doing one-on-one coaching. I usually focus on startups or small companies, like under 50 employees. I often work with entrepreneurs one-on-one who are launching new products or programs, and they have to sell it first. And so working with them to make that that process of learning a new skill, bringing that. So we'll do some one-on-one, but with teams is developing the playbooks. We'll take a look at, get alignment on what are those problems that people are going to relate to, and developing a strategy, and then training the team on that strategy to implement it, and then doing ongoing coaching to help identify what those areas are when they're applying it but not getting the results. It usually falls into this sales musicology area where it's like, okay, you're doing the thing but you're not getting results. Like what else is happening? And then we can get more into the coaching aspect of it.
Amazing. And Jessica, if listeners wanted to follow up with you, where can they find you online?
jpmpartners.com. Jessica Page Magoch Partners. That's for Jessica Page Magoch. jpmpartners.com. There's a contact page on there. That's the best way to get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Jessica, it has been such a pleasure and learning experience to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining.
Will, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.